For the privacy of those involved, certain names and details have been altered. Some photographs depicted are not of the original crime scene. On the night of September 14, 2011, 61-year-old Linda Gail and Edward Blair, her 27-year-old grandson, were heading home along Route 26. The headlights of their black SUV pierced the Mount Hood National Forest fog, then vanished completely. 3 days into the search, at 3:15 in the afternoon, a rescue team noticed a damaged guardrail on a sharp turn above the White River. Deep within a rocky ravine below lay a twisted wreck. Its airbags were deployed. The windshield was blown out, and a significant amount of blood saturated the front seats. Both doors hung open. Canine units searching for miles found no victims, nor any sign of an injured person. The vehicle's 2 occupants had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving authorities with a gruesome scene and a mystery far more disturbing than a simple car crash. September 14, 2011. Night was falling. In Oregon, autumn cloaks the wet roads in a thick, disorienting fog, a predictable and dangerous phenomenon. Highway 26, a treacherous road snaking through Mount Hood's ancient, somber forests, has a reputation for being deadly. This was the path home for 61-year-old Linda Gail and her grandson, Edward Blair, age 27. Their vehicle, a black Mercedes GLE, sliced through the enveloping darkness with its high beams. Their last known location was a roadside diner called Osprey Pines', located in the small town of Sandy. Surveillance video from a gas station opposite the diner captured their SUV entering the lot at 11:25 p.m. A waitress there, Marion Roberts, provided investigators with a detailed account of their final known hours. She recalled the older woman and the young man ordering 2 plates of meatloaf and a large carafe of coffee. Their demeanor was relaxed and cheerful. She overheard them making plans for the upcoming weekend. At 11:52 p.m., Linda settled the bill with cash, tipped generously, and the pair departed. Nothing seemed amiss. No frantic calls, no apparent anxiety, no texts indicating a detour. The expected drive to Portland was direct, a journey that typically takes about an hour and 40 minutes, but they never arrived. By 10 a.m. on September 15th, Linda's daughter had called the Portland police. Her mother's cell phone went straight to voicemail, and Edward had missed his shift at a local engineering firm. By 2:30 that afternoon, authorities had officially filed a missing persons report. Considering Linda's age, and with no apparent reason for them to disappear willingly, police launched a full-scale search. The operation mobilized area rangers, 45 volunteers with canine units, and a state patrol helicopter. For 2 days, crews methodically scoured more than 40 miles of Highway 26. Conditions worsened as a persistent fog rolled in, severely hampering aerial surveillance of the route. Nighttime temperatures fell to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, drastically reducing survival odds for anyone injured. Crews checked every gorge and forgotten trail. Then on September 17th, day 3 of the search, at 7:40 a.m., a patrol unit observed a warped section of guardrail along a treacherous curve above the White River. The officers pulled over and cautiously moved toward the precipice. Below, the earth and thick blackberry brambles were violently disturbed, creating an obvious path where something heavy had plunged down a near 45-degree slope. A recovery team was on scene by 8:15. Navigating the 150-foot drop into the rocky ravine demanded specialized climbing gear and winch systems. The scene at the bottom was something out of a horror film. The black Mercedes was now a mangled mass of steel, pinned between 2 ancient pines. The collision's force had been so extreme, it drove the engine block into the passenger compartment, ejecting the windshield. All 6 airbags had functioned correctly and now hung like soiled rags. But another detail deeply unsettled the forensic investigators. As investigators peered inside the crushed cabin, they were confronted by the sheer volume of blood. Deep crimson saturated both front seats. The dashboard was shattered, and the vehicle's headliner was buckled and stained. On the back seat, a handbag sat untouched, its cash and cards perfectly in place. Both doors gaped open, hinting at a frantic escape, yet the vehicle was empty. Investigators quickly established a mobile command center at the scene. Canine units were deployed into the thick brush, searching for any scent of the injured. Divers scoured the frigid, fast-moving White River for 3 meters downstream, twice. They theorized the victims, disoriented, had stumbled into the water. The search yielded nothing. Just 20 feet from the wreck, the trail went cold, as if it had vanished into thin air. A trail of blood stopped dead at the base of a sheer rock face. offering no further clues. Linda and Edward had vanished, leaving only twisted metal and blood-stained upholstery. The investigation stalled, becoming one of the department's most haunting unsolved cases. Within weeks, the story faded from the headlines. The case files were archived, another mystery the Oregon woods refused to solve. Yet, a single, overlooked detail in the forensics report gnawed at the lead detective. On the exterior handles of the car's open doors, there were no blood stains. It suggested the doors weren't opened by the bleeding occupants within, but by an unseen party in the darkness. October 2013. 2 years to the day since the incident on Highway 26, a bone-chilling autumn rain fell over Portland, emptying the streets into concrete voids. The time was 2:15 in the morning. A patrol unit conducted a routine sweep through the city's southeast, along the Springwater Corridor Trail. It was a bleak corridor, hemmed in by derelict factories and overgrown thickets. The area had a reputation, notorious for its sprawling, makeshift homeless encampments. As the downpour intensified, the patrol car's wipers struggled against a deluge. Then, their headlights cut through the gloom, revealing a solitary figure. A woman was trudging along the shoulder of the road, seemingly unaware of the biting wind or the cold rain pooling at her feet. Per protocol, the officers pulled over to investigate a suspicious individual after dark. Their initial assessment was a disoriented homeless person, likely suffering from addiction. Her appearance was harrowing. She was gaunt, physically depleted. A dirty, wrinkled face was framed by tangled gray hair, her body lost in oversized, drenched clothing. But it was her eyes that most disturbed the veteran officers. They were vacant and glassy, showing no reaction to the harsh glare of their tactical flashlights. She remained unresponsive to their questions, instead muttering a stream of disjointed, nonsensical words. The patrolman's report meticulously documented her incoherent speech. Her whispers circled back to a disturbing refrain: loud, laughing, and don't look down. With no identification, she was transported to the central precinct for processing and evaluation. At 3:40 in the morning, she was brought to booking, where her fingerprints were taken electronically. The officer on duty ran the prints, anticipating a match for vagrancy or petty crimes. The database search took approximately 20 minutes. When the system returned a positive match, the officer stared at the screen in disbelief. The program had made a positive identification, but it seemed impossible. It was Linda Gail, the woman declared dead 24 months prior near the White River. Against all odds, she was alive and was moved to a secure psychiatric unit for evaluation. A medical examination uncovered evidence of significant head trauma and numerous scars from an unknown source. Following a battery of tests, a psychiatric team diagnosed an unusually severe case of retrograde amnesia, complicated by dissociative fugue. This condition stemmed from both physical trauma and a psychological shock so deep it forced her mind to erase the past. Police began a scrupulous timeline reconstruction, which soon revealed a startling inconsistency in the official narrative. For those 2 years, Linda had not been lost somewhere in the mountain's dense forests. Investigators combing through clinic archives found records that confirmed the unbelievable. Merely 2 days after the catastrophic accident, a truck driver had found a disoriented, blood-soaked woman on the highway 40 meters from the SUV's wreckage. He drove her to Portland and left her in the care of medical professionals. With no name and no past, she was entered into the state system as Jane Doe. Linda was shuffled between the Burnside Crisis Center and low-cost state psychiatric facilities. The trauma had served as a flawless eraser, wiping her name, her family, and any memory of her grandson, Edward. The detective stood in the clinic hallway, staring at the database printouts and a new medical file. The gravity of the situation sent a chill through him. If an elderly woman with a head injury could travel 40 miles on foot over harsh terrain, fleeing a wreck, what exactly was she so desperate to escape from? If she survived and fled, then where had the healthy, physically capable Edward been all this time? And whose sinister laughter haunted Linda's fractured mind each time she closed her eyes? Before we continue to piece together this grim puzzle, we have a small request. Please subscribe to our channel, like the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. The platform's algorithms are structured so that your activity greatly aids in promoting the video. Because of this, more people will learn of this story. Your support is crucial for our future work. Now, back to the case. Linda's appearance compelled the Portland police to reopen the investigation. The file was no longer considered a dead end. Lead detectives submitted a formal request to retrieve the black SUV's wreckage from impound. The objective was a more advanced examination using technologies unavailable at the time of the crash. Forensic specialists subjected the mangled chassis to ultraviolet radiation and laser scanning. Their discovery on the heavily damaged rear bumper completely altered the course of the investigation. Laser scans identified microscopic particles of a hard polymer coating ground into the vehicle's metal. A lab analysis confirmed it was a high-strength matte paint known in niche circles as Raptor. This particular material is specifically used to coat heavy-duty pickup trucks and vehicles built for extreme off-road conditions. The angle of the metal's deformation gave police definitive proof this was not an accident. It was a calculated ramming. Experts constructed an exact model of the impact. A massive vehicle overtook them at over 60 miles per hour. The unknown assailant then cold-bloodedly executed a professional police maneuver, striking the SUV's rear fender to send it plunging into the deep ravine. Simultaneously, investigators brought in the state's most skilled forensic psychiatrist. Their challenge was to carefully retrieve the sealed memories from Linda's fractured psyche. During one session of light hypnosis, the elderly woman's calm shattered into frantic screaming. The psychological barrier had crumbled, and the events of that night rushed back in a torrent. Linda described a terrible, deafening impact to the rear of their vehicle, a sensation of falling through darkness, and the sound of metal screaming against trees. According to her taped testimony, she awoke still in the passenger seat. The cabin was filled with a dense, choking smoke. Edward was beside her. He was unresponsive, his face covered in blood from a severe head wound. When a primal fear drove her to kick open a jammed door, she clawed her way out of the twisted metal, fingers bleeding, as she scaled the steep incline toward the highway to find help. But when the bleeding woman reached the cold asphalt, she found no flashing lights or concerned bystanders. Instead, a large pickup truck, its headlights extinguished, was parked yards from the cliff's edge, where a tall figure stood motionless. In his hand was a high-intensity tactical flashlight. The man was methodically sweeping a beam of light across the ruined SUV below, his laughter echoing in the dead quiet of the forest. It was the unhinged, sickening laughter of a psychopath who took pleasure in destruction and suffering. In that instant, a paralyzing terror seized Linda's mind. She knew instinctively this was no accident. She was witnessing a killer admiring his own brutal work. She understood that any sound, any movement, would expose her and make her an easy target. So she made the only choice she had. She turned silently and, with her last reserves of strength, ran down the dark road in the opposite direction. The woman ran through the thick Oregon fog, numb to the cold, until blood loss and exhaustion finally overtook her. Her flight from the maniac had saved her. But later, inside an investigator's office, seasoned detectives turned pale as they listened to the recording of her hypnotic session and grasped a terrible fact. If Linda had escaped that night and never returned to the car, then what had happened to the unconscious Edward, whom she had personally left behind in the passenger seat? The realization that the crash on Highway 26 was not a tragic accident, but a cold-blooded, meticulously planned murder attempt fundamentally changed the direction of the case. The Portland Police Department, recognizing the profound severity of the situation, immediately transferred all case materials to the regional office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Bureau's top analysts were tasked with an incredible directive: pull records from every available archive. They were to find every report of a single vehicle accident in the entire state of Oregon for the last 5 years. What started as a tedious administrative task quickly devolved into a systemic nightmare. The team of analysts, working in grueling nonstop shifts, uncovered a frightening, perfectly calibrated pattern that sent a chill through the most hardened investigators. 14 highly questionable incidents were identified, all on the winding, remote stretches of highway that bordered the Deschutes and Willamette National Forests. In every one of these cases, vehicles had swerved into deep ravines, smashed into old-growth trees at speed, or plunged from rocky cliffs. The vast majority of these incidents were officially closed by local sheriffs as routine accidents, supposedly caused by severe weather, excessive speed, or drivers simply falling asleep. However, the testimonies of the few survivors, unearthed from forgotten case files, shared the same blood-curdling detail. In their initial statements, given from hospital beds while in a state of profound shock, the victims spoke of the blinding glare of abnormally powerful headlights suddenly filling their rearview mirrors. Just seconds before they completely lost control of their cars, they consistently reported a heavy, jolting impact to their rear bumper that sent their vehicles into the abyss. To develop an accurate psychological profile of this unknown subject, leading profilers from a specialized behavioral analysis unit were immediately brought into the investigation. After a thorough study of the attacks, the experts arrived at an unequivocal and terrifying conclusion. The investigation was confronting an exceedingly dangerous and rare breed of serial offender, classified in the highest echelons of criminology as a chaos killer. Unlike the vast majority of perpetrators, this man was not compelled by any of the classic motives investigators understood. He wasn't seeking financial gain, nor was he exacting revenge on any particular individuals for past grievances, and his acts of destruction contained not the slightest sexual component. For this psychopathic outlier, the reward was the hunt itself on deserted, unlit highways, the deafening sound of crumpling metal. For him, the act of ending a life with a turn of the wheel was power. It was a twisted validation, perhaps his only form of entertainment. Oregon's dark highways became his hunting grounds. Solitary motorists, his prey. With the killer poised to strike again, the clock was ticking. Police poured all available resources into reviewing CCTV footage near previous crash sites. The crucial break came from a forgotten place. A derelict sawmill 30 meters from a crime scene, 2 years cold. A thermal imaging camera, affixed on its gate, capturing a blurred but forensically useful image of a passing truck. It was an older Ford E550 pickup, heavily and professionally modified. The truck's body was coated in a matte black paint that swallowed the light, the same microparticles a laser had found on Linda Gail's crushed SUV. But its most intimidating feature was a massive, custom-welded steel ram, built for one purpose: merciless, high-speed impact. Analysts fed the truck's dimensions and specific modifications, along with license plate fragments, into a combined West Coast database. The system returned a single 100% match. They finally had a name. The truck was registered to a 42-year-old man, Seth Wayne. His file was a bleak chronology of aggression, detailing bar fights, illegal firearms possession, and sadistic acts against animals. Wayne was an incorrigible outcast, a sullen drifter with a substantial criminal past who had lived off-grid for the last 10 years. He had no job, no address, and no bank accounts, preferring to haunt the deep, wet, impenetrable forests of Oregon, moving his camp constantly in the heavy pickup. An APB for Seth Wayne and his modified black Ford was issued to every patrol officer in the state. At operational headquarters, investigators now had a name for the phantom terrorizing their roads, and they knew exactly what his weapon looked like. Elite tactical units began preparing for a large-scale operation to comb the wilderness. Detectives were certain Wayne's arrest would finally answer the most haunting questions, and none was more important than this one. What happened to 27-year-old engineer Edward Blair, who vanished in the fog 2 years ago? But as an advanced team of rangers pinpointed the maniac's camp deep in the forest, they were oblivious to a chilling reality. The hunter and his victim had already switched roles. The search began on November 12, 2013, at 6:15 in the morning. A thick fog still hung low over the Willamette National Forest as a joint team of special forces and rangers began to search the rugged landscape. More than 70 heavily armed officers, alongside K-9 units, formed a long chain, moving methodically through the damp undergrowth. All communications were on encrypted channels to avoid alerting their target. Progress was agonizingly slow through the difficult terrain, across steep slopes and deep ravines. At 2:30 p.m., a scout team finally radioed in a discovery. 20 miles from the nearest road, deep within the thicket, the rangers had located a cleverly disguised campsite. It was tucked into a natural alcove between two large rocks, concealed by military-style camouflage netting. Under it, in the shadows, sat the Ford E550 pickup truck. The vehicle looked ominous. It was entirely matte black, with a massive, crudely welded steel ram on the front. The forensic experts who arrived on the 2 hours later, special units arrived to begin processing the vehicle. They meticulously scraped microscopic samples from the reinforced bumper. The initial field analysis confirmed the investigators' darkest theory. The metal bore deep gouges containing polymer fragments, a perfect match to Linda Gail's SUV. They had found the murder weapon. But the team's sense of victory was short-lived. When a tactical team surrounded the camp, they found Seth Wayne had simply vanished. And what's more, the evidence suggested the vicious predator had not left his hideout by choice. The camp was the scene of a brutal, desperate struggle, its heavy tarp torn to shreds, camping gear, fuel canisters, and food tins, and the man's personal effects were strewn in a chaotic 30-foot radius. Deep impressions in the earth spoke of a violent and prolonged fight for life. But the clearing center held the most disturbing discovery of all. Forensics uncovered a massive, blackened pool of blood more than 3 feet across. The surrounding foliage was marked with the telltale spray of arterial bleeding. The sheer volume of blood loss pointed to a critical, likely fatal injury. A rush DNA analysis from a mobile lab delivered a shocking result. The blood belonged not to another victim, but to the camp's owner, Seth Wayne. The hunter who had terrorized Oregon's highways had become the prey. The pivotal piece of evidence that turned the entire investigation on its head was located by a police canine in a blackberry thicket 40 feet from the scene. It was a 24-inch tire iron, a 5-pound piece of steel, a crude and deadly weapon. An officer carefully secured the metal, found in a sealed evidence bag, and dispatched it to the state crime lab. The next morning at 8 o'clock, the lab results stunned even the most hardened detectives. On the heavy, curved end of the steel tool, technicians identified a thick layer of coagulated blood and bone fragments. The hair was a 100% genetic match to Seth Wayne, but the true bombshell was the clear fingerprints covering the handle. The forensic database returned a match within seconds. They belonged to Edward Blair, a 27-year-old engineer who, by all official accounts, had been dead for 2 years. In the stark silence of the lead investigator's office, the detectives began to reassemble the pieces of an impossible puzzle. The new picture that emerged was terrifying. Edward had not died that night. Regaining consciousness inside the mangled car with a severe head wound, his first sight was the empty seat beside him. His grandmother was gone. In that moment of unimaginable horror, the young engineer's mind flipped a switch to survival. He climbed from the wreckage and found a heavy steel tool on the ground. Then, fighting through shock, he silently climbed the embankment and saw a man celebrating. Edward did not panic and run, as Linda had. He gripped the cold metal and attacked the monster from behind. With absolute fury, the investigation now possessed undeniable proof that the young man had not only survived, but had emerged the victor in a deadly fight with a serial killer. And this new reality raised questions that sent a chill through the department. If Edward was capable of overpowering a maniac, why didn't he go back for Linda? Why didn't he flag down a car or call for help to report a clear case of self-defense? But one question, above all others, haunted the investigators. If Blair had somehow survived, where had he and his attacker gone for 2 years? And whose blood now cleansed the abandoned camp with every rainfall? A heavy tire iron found at the scene marked a chilling turning point in the case. Traces of the killer's blood and Blair's prints forced a radical shift in perspective. The 27-year-old engineer was no longer a victim. After 24 months presumed dead, he had suddenly become suspect number 1. A disturbing paradox now confronted homicide detectives and federal agents. If Edward Blair had, in fact, survived that September night, where had he and the heavily armed Seth Wayne been for the last 2 years? Why would a hero who stopped a killer not come forward to save his grandmother? To unravel this dark, unsettling mystery, the Federal Bureau of Investigation adopted an unconventional strategy. A direct search of the dense forests was deemed futile. They expanded their focus, analyzing unsolved crimes within 100 miles of the camp. Analysts searched for anomalies, peculiar thefts, anything unusual. Weeks of sifting through municipal data revealed a pattern of silent intrusions. Slowly, a new and deeply disturbing picture began to emerge. A string of highly professional burglaries plagued several quiet, remote Oregon towns. The criminal's signature was identical in every case. The thief bypassed sophisticated, multi-layered electronic alarms with unnerving ease. He wasn't crudely cutting wires. He was deactivating the control panels. He left no prints, no fibers, not a single microscopic trace behind. This expertise immediately drew a line back to Edward Blair's professional life. Blair had been a senior security engineer. He understood these systems intimately. The Phantom's first major target was a wholesale hardware store in Madras. According to the store owner's report, no money was taken from the register or safe. The perpetrator had no interest in money. Instead, a bizarre and specific collection of items had vanished from the storerooms. Among the stolen goods were packages of industrial-strength plastic ties, a heavy-duty gasoline generator, large containers for potable water, and high-capacity automotive batteries. But true horror emerged when they cross-referenced this list with other local burglaries. The targets were rural veterinary clinics, but again, cash and narcotics were ignored. The stolen items included broad-spectrum antibiotics and powerful painkillers, gallons of saline solution, sterile intravenous equipment, scalpels, and surgical instruments, all methodically removed from locked steel cabinets. After a detailed analysis of the stolen medical supplies, forensic and medical experts reached a single, bone-chilling conclusion. Someone was assembling the components for a hidden, self-sufficient, makeshift operating theater. The quantity of supplies suggested this was not for healing the sick. This was about keeping someone alive against their will, entirely off the grid. Investigators focused all available resources on the routes connecting the crime scenes. The break came late on the night of December 15th. Agents were reviewing grainy footage from an ATM near a desolate Red Canyon gas station model. The security camera was fixed on the cashier's glowing window. The grainy footage revealed a tall, hooded figure buying gallons of diesel, paying quietly with crumpled cash. For a single moment, he glanced highwayward, his gaunt face caught in the glow of a faded neon sign. The fleeting image, just seconds long, was all the facial recognition software required. The face in the footage was disturbing, its features unnaturally skeletal. A thick, matted beard grew wild, and from beneath his heavy brow came a heavy, vacant stare, the look of a man forever disconnected from the world. The system returned a 100% match. The late-night customer was Edward Blair. Authorities now had confirmation. Blair was alive, at large, and constantly feeding a stolen generator. He was hiding somewhere in the vast, desolate Oregon wilderness. But where was the place that had twisted an engineer into this phantom? And what dark process demanded the generator's unending power? For more than 72 hours, FBI analysts meticulously compiled data on Blair's movements. They analyzed endless hours of security video, tracking his every stop at remote stations. Using the manufacturer's specifications for the stolen industrial generator, engineers calculated its precise fuel consumption against his purchase records. The calculation produced a distinct search radius, outlining his probable location. The vector pointed northeast, into the barren, rocky interior of Oregon. There, 60 miles from town, lay a defunct mining operation in the heart of the dead landscape. A derelict facility, abandoned since the mid-80s, stood forgotten by all. The massive, grim, concrete building resembled the silhouette of a military bunker. However, the bulk of this industrial monster lay hidden below, a subterranean maze of service tunnels. It was a perfect, isolated place to conceal anything or anyone from the world. On December 18th, at 4 a.m., a joint task force of elite units descended upon the old quarry. The mission was immediately designated top secret and assigned the highest danger classification. A psychological profile, compiled by experts on the eve of the assault, assessed Blair as armed, highly intelligent, and an extreme threat. Analysts theorized that the violent forest encounter had triggered a severe form of post-traumatic stress disorder, completely shattering his grip on reality. The tactical plan for the operation was built around a worst-case scenario. They prepared for mined approaches to his subterranean lair and a final, violent stand. At 5:15 a.m., shrouded by darkness and an icy wind, camouflaged sniper teams established overwatch on the rocky berms, covering all escape routes. At 6 a.m., the assault commander gave the order to initiate the operation. With a metallic groan, an armored vehicle breached the rusted perimeter gate, clearing a path. Behind ballistic shields, operators in full tactical gear moved swiftly into the concrete plant. The ground floors were secured in under 20 minutes. They found only dust and decay. The team understood the real threat lay deep beneath them. Splitting into 3 tactical groups, the operators began a slow, methodical descent. Daylight vanished, replaced by an absolute blackness, a heavy darkness broken only by the focused beams from their rifle lights. As the operators pushed through long, concrete tunnels 40 feet down, they felt a palpable, steady drop in temperature. An oppressive silence was punctuated only by the tread of tactical boots and coded reports over the comms. The walls of the sublevel were slick with icy condensation and a film of black mold. Then, the pointman's fist shot up, a silent, immediate command for the team to halt. A faint vibration pulsed up through the solid concrete under their feet. As they listened, the low, monotonous drone of an industrial generator became clear. The sound originated from the lowest level, 3 floors down. Descending a narrow, rusted staircase, they found the first definitive evidence of human occupation. Fresh gouges scarred the dusty handrail, and a thick power cable was neatly run along the wall. This makeshift electrical line guided the team to the end of a long, dark tunnel. There, caught in the beams of a dozen weapon lights, stood a massive steel pressure door, the old entrance to the complex's main pumping station. The visual disconnect was jarring and deeply sinister. Against the corroded metal of the doorframe, 3 new, hardened steel padlocks secured the mechanism. The team leader gestured for the engineering specialist to move forward. Using explosives was not an option. The risk of catastrophic collapse in the confined, decaying space was too high. For the next 10 minutes, the only sound was the high-pitched, piercing scream of a hydraulic tool chewing through the lock's steel hasps. The third and final lock hit the wet concrete floor with a heavy thud. 2 operators threw their weight against the lever, wrenching the heavy door open. A thick, unbreathable wave of stagnant air billowed from the dark void. It was a nauseating mix of odors that choked them. The sharp, chemical scent of antiseptics failed to mask the cloying, sweet stench of decomposition, all steeped in the permanent underground damp. The point men tightened their grip, stepping into an unknown darkness, unprepared for the hell within. As the heavy steel door slid open with a long, grinding protest, the operators froze. Even the most hardened veterans on the team, men who had processed some of the most grisly crime scenes imaginable, were utterly unprepared for the scene illuminated by their tactical lights. The vast, damp chamber had been meticulously converted into a sterile, efficient torture room. A man was suspended in the center of the space, chained to a massive support pillar. It was Seth Wayne, the hunter of Oregon's highways. But the once formidable predator now posed no threat to anyone. His savage body was a single, continuous wound, his frame wasted to that of a skeleton. Stolen surgical equipment, saline bags, and syringes were arrayed with chilling precision on tables surrounding the column. Seth Wayne was alive only because a frighteningly methodical mind was keeping him that way. He was fed, given painkillers to prevent cardiac arrest from shock, and hydrated by IV. The serial killer's mind was irretrievably broken. Detached from reality, he could only whimper at the harsh light of the flashlights. Edward Blair emerged slowly from an adjacent utility room, drawn by the noise. The team leader ordered weapons on him, but the suspect registered no response. The former engineer was clean-shaven and neatly dressed, his actions deliberate and calm. His placid face showed no surprise at their arrival, no remorse, no panic, and no fear. But what stared back from Edward's eyes was a chilling, piercing, and terrifying void. The official report states that he raised his hands in silence, offering no resistance. He allowed officers to force him onto the damp concrete floor, the steel cuffs clicking shut. In that moment, he uttered a single, short phrase that would forever haunt the arresting team. He calmly informed them he had done what justice never would. During the interrogation that followed, detectives pieced together the harrowing events of that September night 2 years prior. After ambushing Seth Wayne on the asphalt with a tire iron, Edward had gone down to the wrecked SUV, but his grandmother was not there. In the total darkness, he searched, concluding she'd been thrown into the mountain river, left to die by the driver. At that moment, the engineer's brilliant, ordered mind fractured permanently. He never called emergency services. He never alerted the police. Edward bound the unconscious man, put him in his pickup, and drove to an abandoned quarry. He was determined Seth Wayne would not receive the comfort of a state prison cell. Edward Blair then dedicated 730 days of his life to making his captive beg for death. He became a monster, far more ruthless than the man who had wronged him. The engineer's trial in Portland became a national spectacle that divided the country. Despite a fierce public debate, the jury returned the harshest possible verdict for kidnapping and systematic torture. Edward Blair received a life sentence in a maximum security federal prison with no chance of parole. Seth Wayne, the true author of dozens of tragedies, was confined to a secure psychiatric hospital for life. His mind never returned. And Linda Gail, whose reappearance from obscurity launched the investigation, now lives in a private retirement home just outside Portland. Her memory, a merciful shield, has blocked out the most terrifying chapters of her life. Every morning at 9 o'clock, the well-dressed woman sits in a chair by a large window. For hours, she watches the driveway, telling the nurses with a bright smile that today her beloved grandson Edward is coming. And not one person on that medical staff has the heart to tell the lonely woman what her caring boy became on Highway 26. This story is more than a chilling mystery. It is a profound exploration of the fragile line between justice and the darkness that consumes us. From the shadows of Highway 26, we derive a powerful, haunting lesson. When we fight monsters, we must be careful not to become one ourselves. The tragedy of Edward Blair teaches us that trauma is a powerful force that can fracture the most brilliant minds. While his desire to protect his family was noble, his descent into a 2-year cycle of systematic vengeance turned a victim into a predator. It serves as a stark reminder that true justice belongs in the light of the law, not in the hollow, cold tunnels of a private hell. Vigilantism may offer a fleeting sense of power, but it ultimately erases the very humanity we seek to defend. Furthermore, let this be a call to vigilance and compassion. Behind every Jane Doe or disoriented stranger is a person with a name, a family, and a story. We must foster a society where the broken are found sooner and where grief is met with support rather than isolation. Choose the light of healing over the darkness of revenge. Let us protect our souls as fiercely as we protect our loved ones.